Namaskar. Please like this program as soon as you start watching it so it will go as far wide as possible. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. This is 2 episodes of unanswered questions of Ask Abhijit program, episodes 52 and 53. 52 aired on the 28th of March and 53 on the 4th of April. Please do watch it till the end. There's always a chance that your question was asked.
Mr. Lee, India ranks number 3rd in the world in number of think tanks after USA and China. Who funds think tanks in general, and specifically who funds ORF and IPCS? So ORF is partially Reliance, Mukesh Ambani Reliance, and 80% of the rest of our funding comes from heaps of other sources, other think tanks, other fund providers, so Plowshares. You can literally go on the website and check. There's a transparency policy where all the funders are listed, different governments, think tanks, everybody. And it's the exact same for IPCS as well, where I work, which is, we get funded by we do projects with the government of India. So it's all project-based funding. So with the government of India, with foreign governments, with foreign agencies, everybody under the sun, different ministries. So that's that. Next. Jay. Abhijit, who are Alawite Muslims and how they are different from other sects of Islam, and how Bashar al-Assad, Alawite minority Muslim able to rule, I guess. Okay. Alawite, why don't you just Google it? I'm sure there's a very long Wikipedia entry, so I'm not going to get into that. But how are they able to rule? Look, so what happened with Syria was, Syria was and still remains a Sunni majority country. And what happened was that when this was under the French mandate, a part of Syria called Lebanon was broken away from Syria. Okay. And what happened with that was a huge chunk. Lebanon was created to make an artificial Christian majority. Okay. So when it was broken off in 1920 or something like that, it had a 1917, 18, sometime that time. But basically end of the First World War, mandate Syria, as in the League of Nations mandate Syria. It created an artificial Christian majority. Since then, it's actually become an absolute Shia majority, but they haven't had a census there from 1921, so nobody can really tell, because the census is a fraught issue. Because the power equation used to be Christians at top. It was an executive presidency, a Muslim prime minister. The prime minister was pretty much powerless, and a Shia, a Sunni prime minister and a Shia speaker of parliament was also powerless. And what happened after the wars and the Taif Accords, the civil war, the 1980s, 90 civil war was, that shifted. The PM got all the power. The executive president, who remained a Christian, was made kind of powerless, mostly powerless. And the speaker still remained powerless, even though the Shia are an absolute majority. So the way the Shia have gained control there is through Hezbollah and Amal. In Syria, it's different. Now, once one big chunk of the population was taken out, you essentially had Shias who were in urban areas, who were the educated elite, and you had the Sunnis in rural areas who were the farmers kind of thing, right? And so what happened was, even within the Shias, now there's a big school of difference in this. Some people consider Alawites a completely separate sect. Most Alawites I've spoken to consider themselves to be Shia. But even there's a huge amount of Shia-Sunni intermarriage out there. So what happens in Syria is the educated elites, who are the Alawites and the Christians, they form an alliance, and they have been controlling Syria just the same way, say, 𝗘𝗽𝗀𝘀𝘀𝘀, who comprise 20% of the Punjab population, have ruled Punjab irrespective. Our chief minister is a 𝗘𝗽𝗀, Congress chief minister is a 𝗘𝗽𝗀, Akali Dal chief minister is 𝗘𝗽𝗀, same like that. So they control power that way because they were educated and urban and able to control the means of power. Next. Look, do you expect any progress for Rashtriya Prajatantra Party or Hindu Seva Sangh in the 2022 Nepal elections? Not much. I haven't even looked it up. I haven't even been paying attention to it. Looks, I'm very sorry, but my entire bandwidth has been taken up in Ukraine and Sri Lanka right now, so not even looking at Nepal. Next, if the US Congress passes the Islamophobia bill, what implications will it have for India, or how can we use it against us? Look, they'll use Islamophobia against us irrespective. The government, maybe not, but government agencies like US, the US Committee on International Religious Freedoms, USCIRF, that's it. It's such a tongue twister, yeah. Those guys will keep using it against us. The newspapers will use it against us. And I mean, look, you've got somebody like Rana Ayub, who's essentially used to knock us over the head. I mean, imagine having somebody so uninteresting whose only story to tell is Muslim. She writes about nothing else. Everything is oppression, oppression, oppression. Why does she have a regular column? I mean, she doesn't have a column in the newspaper. It's only there in the online version. But she does, and it's just used to hit you over the head, and that's perfectly fine. But it's mostly a verbal, rhetorical tool against us, right? We have certain protections which will never really translate into anything tangible unless there's a break in relations. Next. Karan Pandita, just got to know Nepal has the most pro-LGBT laws in all of Asia, even better than East Europe, Latin American nations. How did this happen? What are your views on the monarchy in Nepal? Again, I have not studied the pro-LGBTQ laws, but I will do that. Thank you for telling me about it, Karan. And my views on monarchy in Nepal, well, it's gone, so there's no point having a view about it. Next. Sushi Gupta, why Catholic Church against Jews and Russian Orthodox? So, it's been a complicated history. I won't say, look, the Catholic Church was against Jews and sometimes it wasn't against Jews. There have been lots of instances, even in medieval history, when pogroms were happening where the Catholic Church tried to protect Jews, and other times where it pretty much sanctioned the pogroms of Jews. The Catholic Church, you see, has an issue. Any church has an issue with those who are not us. Okay, so unless you accept the supremacy of the Pope, it's a power play equation. They're not going to like you much. But the Jews, very specifically, the issue is the blood libel, right? That it was not Pontius Pilate who had Christ crucified, but the Jews who had Christ crucified. So there's generally been a Christian hatred of Jews for a very long time, because remember, Peter and Paul were the founders of the Christian church. They wanted Christianity to become the religion of the empire. So they whitewashed all the crimes of the Roman Empire and they blamed the Jews for it. And the Jews, of course, weren't tolerating Peter and Paul and they kicked them out. So it kind of just went. So it's historical against Jews. Russian Orthodox, look, the Catholic Church has, like I said, problems with everyone, but I bet you they have less problems with the Russian Orthodox Church than they have with a lot of Catholic, with a lot of Protestant churches and things like that. In fact, you'd find it is the Russian Orthodox Church that has more against the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church is reformed. The Russian Orthodox Church hasn't really reformed much. Next. The other Cruz, do you think Modi government should get into hate politics and torture, persecute radical leftists like Rana, ruin their lives, or is it better to ignore them and let them enjoy a good life? Look, Rana, Dhruv Rathi, these people have been created by the right way. Okay, they decide to start trolling them left, right, and center, and they make them larger than life. Now, when you've been created by the right, okay, why blame the BJP for their meteoric rise, or why blame this Rana? Why credit Rana or Dhruv for their own meteoric rise? That said, the BJP is never going to crack down on Rana and Dhruv because these people help the BJP win votes. It takes just one Rana Ayub column, no matter how pissed off you are with the government. It takes just one Rana Ayub column or one Dhruv Rathi video to make you vote for the BJP, even though you don't want to vote for the BJP. So remember, even with this ED case, it was because some online OSINT guys, Agent Vinod, Akshat Deora, Hawkeye, Vikas Pandey, it was because all these people collated the OSINT and sent it to ED. You think ED didn't know what was happening? You think ED wouldn't have kept tabs on Rana, number one enemy, self-proclaimed number one enemy of the BJP? No, it was because these guys sent it and they publicized on Twitter and it got so much traction on Twitter. ED would have looked really bad not doing something about it. I can bet you that Modi is cursing these four chaps, Agent Vinod, Akshat and all those people, saying, तुम लोग मेरे को जितवाना चाहते हो या तुम लोग मेरे को हरवाना चाहते हो? So I don't think, and it's not hate politics, by the way, it's law and order. But what has Dhruv said to get him into jail? Technically, Rana's case is one of fraud, and that is an economic offense that has to be looked into. But other than that, why get into it? I think what the Modi government does, which is ignoring these people, but they should also ask their followers to ignore them. That would be much better. Next. Mandar Karnik, what are the reforms necessary in India in the next 5 years? Really, Mandar. I mean, how many times have we asked this and answered this? Well, I'd start with, say, first and foremost, police reforms and education reforms. Your new education policy is a nightmare. It's not going to cut it, okay? I know everybody's going gaga over it, but when you're looking at problem-solving based education, consider this. Problem-solving based education is much more expensive. It requires a much lower student-to-teacher ratio. It requires a very high caliber of teachers. You have none of those three. So it looks great on paper. It's going to be a disaster in terms of implementation. Okay. But education reform is something we need. A privatization of education essentially, and a liberalization of it. And the second thing that you need is police and judicial reforms. Start there. That's 2 things for the next 5 years. Next, Kanda Batata, is it justifiable to seize Russian? Well, it's not justifiable, but it's legal. You can do it. Except Medvedev has warned that he's going to take them to court, to international arbitration. The problem there is jurisprudence to suggest that you can't do it unless there's a UN Security Council resolution. But before the UN Security Council, these things were done, except when you were in a state of war with the other country. If you are not in a state of war with the other country, there isn't much jurisprudence to suggest that you can seize assets. So we need to see what comes out of the arbitration process. Next. Amay Tandon, Russia to export oil to unfriendly countries in ruble only. A good way to dilute the ill effects of sanctions. Yes, very good. You've seen the ruble is now at the rate of, I think it's become better than what it was before the invasion. So yeah, it's a good way. It's a very partial way. Let's be clear, the sanctions are still going to cripple the Russian economy. But yes, it is a partially half decent way of dealing with it. Yes, absolutely. Next. Lakshmana Sharma, can AIM talk in detail about the genocides of Hindu families and especially women before the 84 riots in Punjab? Is it correct that women were raped and kept inside the Golden Temple along with a gun? Well, I mean, I don't need to talk about it in detail because you can see a list of massacres. Just Google list of massacres in Punjab, you'll get all the details about it. But yes, I remember when growing up, Hindus were literally taken out of trains and shot. Even if you were a Katsar, you were shot. Okay, and yes, there was a lot of rape, but it never got reported. There's lots of stories of rape. The problem is the documentation is extremely shoddy, but presumably they were. And I've met people who claimed that they were raped. Golden Temple, I don't know about. I don't think there were definitely human shields and hostages inside the Golden Temple. So yeah, next. Karan Pandita, your 5 favorite Indian, non-Indian philosophers. I don't have favorite philosophers. I've never enjoyed philosophy. I read it, but I just find it pointless and boring. I'm yet to understand the importance of philosophy per se. Okay. Uh, Basically, I think a lot of glorification of philosophy was because it was a substitute for policy analysis. But ever since policy analysis has emerged, uh, it's like asking me, what's your favorite tool from the Stone Age? I don't have a favorite tool from the Stone Age because, say, a screwdriver is very much an Iron Age, an industrial age invention, right? So it's like asking me that. So philosophy, I think, is an obsolete stream of thought. I have no time for it. I used to read it, now I don't. Next. Look, indigenous AMCA engine, are they going to be made with saffron or Rolls-Royce saffron? No, they're being made with saffron because that's been announced and that's the official announcement. Rolls-Royce, there's huge issues about the transfer of technology, but Safran has committed to the transfer of technology. Rolls-Royce can't transfer the technology because its crystal blade is not British technology, it's American technology, and it is not authorized for transfer to India. It is one of the things the Americans are not willing to transfer to India, right? Why is Russia's Saturn reluctant to share the AL-40 common core tech with India? Well, I don't think we are too keen about it. We've seen what a disastrous engine the Saturn is. So not keen about it. We've never been keen about Russian engines. We go in for it when there is no alternative or when you want something cheap, but we're not keen about it. No. AMCA will be based on the Western thing. They did transfer a lot of things to us. The issue is our ability to absorb it. So, they transferred, for example, the BrahMos motor technology to us, we failed to indigenize it. So there is also absorbability issues, even with the Safran engine. I'm not too sure we'll be able to absorb the entire technology. Aditya Iyer, is halal economy a sinister method that will lead to economic monopolization? Yes, I've written a piece on it in First Post. Go check it out. See, it is a method of economic monopolization. So I would argue it's against the monopolistic and restrictive trade practice, the MRTP Act. You could have used MRTP to crack down on it, but of course they won't. It's simple things. You have to say that every restaurant has to offer a menu in halal meat, and they have to offer the same menu in certified non-halal meat. Okay, because remember, the persons it affects the most are Hindu, Dalits, so SCs and STs, because they were the ones that were in the butchery trade. So yes, it is. As for the non-food halal certification, it does not, there is not the economic component of exclusion in there. It is merely certification. It doesn't have to be produced by Muslims. The employees don't have to be Muslims. You just have to, one additional thing is, it can't come in contact with any blood of non-halal animals. And the additional thing is that you can't use alcohol to clean the machine or equipment, because no alcohol allowed, remember. So what happens with this is, the non-halal certification is fine. If you institutionalize it, you can prevent its abuse. The food halal, which is the real halal, is a different thing. That is the exclusionary practice that needs to be dealt with. Next. AK, why young people get attracted towards communism and are not able to come out of it even after knowing the truth about it? Well, I used to be a hardcore communist. I used to be a Stalinist Marxist. And then puberty set in and I grew up. I think what you're having is, these days, this responsibility shirking culture. I didn't do it. Society made me do it. A privilege. institutional oppression, everything to reduce your personal responsibility for your actions and blame society for it. What that does is it infantilizes the human being. So what happens is that it's natural to be agitated and upset with everything when you're young, and therefore you become a communist. Then you grow up and become a capitalist. The problem is when you now have teaching and education in the humanities, which is focusing on keeping you prepubescent, making you a prepubescent child for the rest of your life, you can't come out of it because you've been so indoctrinated into it that you're perpetually wallowing in hate and blaming others for your own failure. Next. Ishan Sharma, who do you think will win the USA midterm elections? The Republicans are going to get a landslide. Secondly, who do you think will win the governor elections in key states like Georgia, Florida, Arizona, Texas, etc.? Texas, Florida, Georgia are going Republican. Florida, there's no way you can get rid of Ron DeSantis. He's like amazing. Arizona up in the air. I'm not too sure. I haven't looked at Arizona very carefully yet because Arizona's always been a bit of a swing state. Let's see. But Georgia, Florida, Texas are definitely going Republican. Next. Can Nawaz Sharif improve relationship with India? Yes and no. I know the Sharif family is the most pragmatic of all the political families, the Khan family, the Bhutto family, and the Sharif family. The problem is, will he even try to improve relations with India after what happened to him? Now, mind you, Nawaz Sharif can't. It'll have to be Shahbaz or Mariam. After what happened to Nawaz, do you think they can even try? What is their leeway? You never mess with the army. I think they've learned not to mess with the army. Maybe they're not, so they might try. But will it succeed? No. Next. Gargi called Raina. If the overall IPS training funding, who would be the new trainer and structure of the new training program? Western police, any innovative IPS officers? So see, it's not about getting Western police in. It's basic things that you do that are, because remember, police reforms also includes a hard check on a bureaucratic and political control of the police. Remember that. So, it's simple things. It's improving their pay, putting body cameras on them, separating the investigative from the enforcement duties and things like that. There's very little to learn in terms of technique. The techniques are already here. Our forensics are underfunded, but we keep learning the best practices. The law and order best practices already exist. The problem is one of implementation. And why is it a problem of implementation? Because of interference by politicians, right? They decide kiske khilaf case file karna hai aur kiske khilaf case nahi file karna hai. So when we're talking about police reforms, the fundamental issue is the separation of investigative and distinct powers. It is not so much a training issue, but yes, it is a funding issue, because the funding, more than the body cameras, is the storage of data that you accumulate from the body cameras. But there are innovative solutions for that. So for example, if no crime is reported in 2-3 days, in America, you have to store data for a very long time, so it's a nightmare. Here, if there's no crime reported in 2-3 days, you then delete it centrally, and it's controlled by a central node, so that reduces your data storage requirements and things. But yes, money is always a problem, because the basic training is more about a simplification of language, of the law, and teaching these guys how to implement it. Right now, the police academy actually does a good job of it. The problem is it's the political interference that confuses them. इसको implement करना है या नहीं implement करना है, हमको पता नहीं. हमने केस रजिस्टर कर दिया, कोई आके हमारा पुलिस स्टेशन जला देगा और मेरे को बकरा बना जाके मेरे को sack किया जाएगा. So see, we have to separate. It is not so much of a training issue. Right? Next. Anshuman Singh, what is the best insult you can throw at an Indian parent who, even in year 2022, don't want their children to marry outside the community? Well, I don't want to throw an insult at worthless people. Getting an insult from Abhijit Iyer-Mitra is a mark of great honor. It's right up there with the Bharat Ratna. Huh? So, especially an innovative insult. So, I don't want to waste my innovative insults on garbage. Ishan S. To teach these snobbish Westerners and US a lesson who think by supporting India they're doing a favor. Should India kiss and make up with China and give West the middle finger? Why? Listen, they are actually doing us a favor. Pata hai na? The question is at what cost? So, it's quite one thing putting them in their place, but making up with China, we've tried. It doesn't work because China has decided we're an enemy that needs to be destroyed. So no amount of sucking up or compromise is actually going to work with China. Next. Secondly, on Russian equipment, having seen the kind of losses the Russians have seen in the fight against Ukraine, is India actually making a mistake by buying useless Russian equipment? Yes. I've been saying this for a very long time and people keep calling me a CIA agent. I've been telling you the Sukhoi is crap. Look how many Sukhois have been shot down over Ukraine. Okay, it is crap. Russian tanks are crap. Of course, the issue is Western tanks are also now crap against shoulder-fired missiles. Go check out when the Turks invaded northern Iraq in support of ISIS. The Kurds made, northern Syria in support of ISIS. The Kurds made mincemeat of their tanks. They destroyed Turkish tanks, which were all very good German tanks. So, the problem is you always have, historically, you've always had this issue between lightly armored, heavy armored, how easy is it to take it out, etc., etc. This competition has always been ongoing. I think there's also the nuance, a very unnuanced position would be Russian equipment is shit. Yes, it is. But there's also a much bigger shift in terms of the lethality of individual weapons like shoulder-fired anti-tank or anti-aircraft missiles against helicopters and tanks and things like that. Okay, so it's not the only lesson you have to learn, but yes, it is one of the lessons you have to learn, which is that Russian equipment is now very, very obsolete. It is no longer a question of how it is used in battle. It is now a question of, is it even viable to be used in battle? Next. Hardik Taggi, what do you think about the private space industry in India? It's very good. It's very innovative. The problem is, while ISRO is much more open to collaboration with the private industry, unlike, say, DRDO, which everything has to be forced down DRDO's throat, ISRO, it does not need to be forced down their throat. There are lots of things where ISRO has created the critical mass where it needs to move out and say, we're only going to give this to private industry now, we're not going to do it. So ISRO does provide a lot of subcomponents and things, but there is more and more things that ISRO needs to take a back seat on and allow private industry to get ahead. Next. Mandar Karnik. How can we ensure a rival social media platform of Indic origin and control? I don't think the legal ways will work to control them. The legal ways will work. It depends on how willing the government is to support a judicial judgment. Because remember, the judiciary always takes its cues from the government on what to do. And rival social media platform boss who hai, ki kaun jata hai. But even the other Twitter competitors that have come up, who actually are on it. There was Gab AI, there's Getter and all of those. They haven't taken off the way Twitter has. Unless you've been deplatformed by Twitter. Twitter is always the preferred outlet of choice. Facebook to maine istemal karna band kar diya, but apparently it's very, very popular. Instagram and TikTok are the other ones, right? TikTok for videos, Instagram for photos, but also for videos, and YouTube. You really can't create it. You don't have the entrepreneurial environment here. You don't have the governmental backing off. Yeah, you have extreme judicial and regulatory unpredictability. You never know what they're going to lock you up for and hold you responsible for, etc., etc. So, not really taking off here. It's more an issue of the Indian business environment. Next. Ibrahim A. Thoughts on PK general elections? Can Khan win? Khan is definitely not winning, boss. Next. Gargi called Raina. Any objection to replacing NCERT textbook with Will Durant's history textbook? Look, Will Durant is not a serious historian. We need to be very careful about this. He was more a generalist rhetorician. And why Will Durant? Uh, I would be very careful about the information in there. There is no nuance there. Those are very problematic books. Okay, they are problematic books. They're very good. They're mostly accurate. Don't confuse accurate with what they should be. But also remember, NCERT is at a much lower level of learning. So you can maybe distill a lot of things from them, the macro lessons and things. But as such, Will Durant is an easy read. I wouldn't say it's a technical read. And just because he was horrified by Islamic invasions doesn't mean we celebrate him. Next. Kedarnath Iyer. Why do Indian social media apps not succeed? And it is the US companies, despite India having a large army of developers. Well, I answered this question just before. But also remember, Indian developers are mostly cyber coolies. The high level addition amongst the Indian workforce is extremely low. Next. Manavan Bhattacharya. In considering the situation in Pakistan, do you foresee pro-IPA factions in Pakistan army? No, boss. Start a small war? No. Understand, the army does all its infighting till the commander-in-chief, which is to say the chief of army staff says, "Bas, ab band ho gaya, chup karo." And then they stop. Because that is how the command structure works in any army. There's always squabbling till there's direct instruction from the top. Now stop. Enough is enough. Okay. So there is no chance of this happening because remember, it is not that members of the Pakistan army feel any great affection for Imran Khan. It is that Imran Khan depends on the army and certain factions of the army who will drop him like a hot potato the moment it's time to get dropped. Next. Question 2. China is watching the Russia-Ukraine war. So does China have neo-Nazis in their military? No, China does not have neo-Nazis in their military. But they do have ultra-nationalists because a lot of their training and teaching is extreme, quite violent ultra-nationalism. Who would repeat something similar at Taiwan or Vietnam, India? Well, look, the Chinese will carry out lots of human rights abuses, right? Because they don't understand restraint, they don't understand law. If the army or police carry out human rights abuses, there's literally no consequences for them in China. So it's not so much because of the nationalist training as because of their immunity within the law in China. Will it be exacerbated by the ultranationalism? Yes, it will. Next. Sandman1306. Why do you think Nana Fadnavis was called Maratha Mathew by the British? Well, Machiavelli was a complete failure in his life. So I don't know why they call Nana Fadnavis the Maratha Machiavelli, but I don't really care. I've never been a big fan of Nana Fadnavis. I don't think his manipulations were all that great. But if you actually read some books, there was a fascinating book. I've forgotten the author. Remind me again next time, Sandman. You remind me. I will get that book for you. It actually portrays a lot of what Nana Fadnavis does as extreme confusion. So, yeah, big question mark on that. Huh? Next. Gargi. Has Armenia, Azerbaijan, or Russia-Ukraine war simulated any significant hot force tactical restructuring in Indian armed forces? None. Zero. Our generals aren't stupid. It's just that they are too pushy. There's no accountability. There's no pressure on them to perform or change or anything like that. Right? So we don't take security seriously in this country either. Right? So there's no direction either. Which direction should they go in? Because different generals have different ideas on what needs to be done. So unless you have a political leadership that understands what needs to be done, or not even understand, listen to advice and decide on one course of action. वो भी नहीं करते. Next. Graveyard of empires. Are Taliban really under Pakistani influence? No, they really are not. They've cut off Pakistani influence completely. Especially the Haqqani faction. We didn't expect that from the Haqqani faction, but they have cut off Pakistani influence. They are now doing to Pakistan what Pakistan did to them. Right? They're claiming that, hey, you know, we're a low-end state, we can't really control all these guys. So they're killing Pakistani soldiers every day, and the Haqqani faction just keeps saying, boss, and we don't really control everything. So, no. Gargi again. Karnataka, Andhra, Telangana, TN at 20-25% of marriages between first cousins, 40% in part. What has social health consequences been from this? I don't know if marriages are still 20-25%, Gargi. Are you sure about it? But I can tell you in Tamil Nadu, I can't talk about Karnataka and Andhra, but in Tamil Nadu, I can tell you there are very high instances that I have seen of Down syndrome. Okay. In Pakistan, there's no social commentary or documentaries on it that I've read or seen, so I can't really count about it. But there's a lot of allegorical evidence. Like all the Pakistanis I meet will tell me, "Hey, हमारे इधर बहुत सारे Down syndrome के लोग होते हैं." But like I said, it is apocryphal. It's what I've been told. It's not what I've actually seen. As opposed to Tamil Nadu, where I can tell you that I have seen more people, I would say, in certain villages, who have Down syndrome as a concentration of population than you would in other cities. Okay, social, not so much, because socially it was meant to keep the wealth within the family. So that social concentration element का ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं है, but the health consequences are very severe. Next. Have you checked out the Kingnology newsletter and Substack? No, I have not. Next. Ritu Patil, if Russia and China form a bloc, will they take on the US? No, they really can't. See, it's more than land territory control over resources. You need a lot more. You need control over global institutions. You need control over the seas, which you can't challenge America on right now. I don't think people realize how far ahead America is. There's a lot of glorification of Chinese weapons and things, but trust me, if the Chinese got into Ukraine, they would actually have fared a lot worse than the Russians have. A lot of Chinese weapons are a lot of show, but not delivery. Huh? There is some very good stuff that the Chinese have, but not all. Next. Art Deshpande, hey, I'm currently studying BSc Biotech in India. I want to study abroad. Germany, a good choice for this. And any other advice from you? Look, in all technical subjects, as long as you're not studying the humanities. If you're studying science, Italy, Germany, France, all of them would be good options for you. Okay. But the question is, why do you want to go to Germany and not to, say, America, UK, and things like that? Because as far as I know, most of these courses are taught in Italian, French, and German. So unless you can find an English course, are you willing to take the bridging study of German and things like that? Check. But go in any technical course in a Western university, including Australia or New Zealand, even New Zealand, yes, is a decent course. Just not the humanities in Europe. Please do not do humanities in Europe or New Zealand. Next. Ashish Sharma, is India heading towards totalitarianism? No, from which angle, boss? If anything, Modi is the exact opposite of a totalitarian. He's too weak. Despite all his political power, he just doesn't know how to use power at times. And he's a bit too democratic, in my opinion. Mrinal Saurabh, hello sir, if Hindus are not weak, why did the Hindu Empire fall down against its glory days? Okay. Well, empires rise and empires fall, boss. So why did Chandragupta Maurya fall? Well, because the empire collapsed. Ashoka was a bad economic mismanager, so it started. I've spoken about this in detail during PGurus. Check out those previous episodes. Next. Shrikant asks, how much of is India's debt as of today? There's something called Google. Check it out. Why is it that we don't see much spoken about it? Well, because our debt to equity ratio is very good. Right? We haven't fallen into this credit card trap that America and some parts of Europe have, where the growth is fueled entirely by debt. Okay, or even China, where the debt equity ratio is terrible, it's just hidden. So in India, there isn't that. The debt equity ratio is pretty decent. The last I checked, which was about 4 or 5 years back, so it's not that much of an issue at all. And we're very good at paying off our debt. Now, when you say paying off our debt, what do you mean? Because there is public debt and there is international debt. Which one are you talking about? Be clear about it. Next. AB Anubhav, how can India take back Coco Island? What do you mean take back Coco Island? Coco Island was never ours to begin with. So I don't know why you want it back for anyway, because there's a lot of things we can do without Coco Island. Why add another useless asset that has to be sustained from the mainland and create unnecessary logistical issues? Next. Sudhanshu Suryendu, how can we push Election Commission to introduce online voting? In India, it is simply not going to happen, boss. So don't even think about voting. If the most confidential banking transactions can be done online, very good question. You have to go ask the Election Commission to it. They are absolutely opposed to it because they are of the belief that a politician will be more desperate for your votes and more be willing to use violence against you for votes than for your money. I don't think that is the situation. I have been a huge advocate of it. In the very first sci-fi that ORF posted, it should be somewhere on the ORF website. The Latvian or the Lithuanian or the Estonian, one of those presidents came and voted in his municipal elections sitting in Delhi online in front of a live audience in Delhi. I believe it can be done. I also believe there is zero intention to do it because if you give that kind of cast iron voter verification issues, it also dilutes what little voting manipulation you can do. Okay, and it becomes very problematic because then it opens the door for referendums to be held. Right, you will also get rid of the large amount of staff and power that the Election Commission has. So you're threatening their power base. You're opening the door to more democratization and quick elections. We don't want that. So remember, it's also whose interests are you challenging? Remember that. At 36, if you've never voted, well, shame on you, Sudhanshu. You should have gone and voted. Otherwise, how will you know? Right? There are many, many solutions to this that we've put to the Election Commission. Right? One of the things is to have the phone where you do a Face ID validation. Now, all the phones have Face ID. You match it with the Aadhaar. Does it match the Aadhaar? Yes, it does. Therefore, you are the voter. Is your location where you say it is? It can be a remote location, which you inform the Election Commission if you're traveling or things like that. There are lots of things which are cast iron, which can be done, which the Election Commission doesn't want to do. And because of the interest groups threatened, nothing's going to happen. Next. Humanity First. What's your opinion on Ajit Doval and why does it not focus on internal security? Boss, how many questions are you asking in one? What is my opinion on Ajit Doval? I have a very good opinion of Ajit Doval. And why does not focus on internal security? He does. Why does Iran hate Israel? Please do a Google search. And the effect on India, or if the Iran nuclear deal is done. Okay. Well, not much, because we don't have much trade with Iran anymore. We've diversified our suppliers. At one point of time, Indian refineries were very heavily dependent on Iranian crude, because our, Iran skipped a cycle, a lot of cycles of oil industry modernization. And we had slightly old equipment, so it was a perfect match for our equipment. Not anymore. Ever since sanctions, Reliance is mostly modernized. Almost everybody is modernized. So, we don't need Iran as much as Iran needs us when it is under sanctions. Okay. Now, once it does not need us and it is normalized again, what I suspect you'd see is a lot of bhadkaufying or incitement of Shias in India. Thankfully, Shias are economically much better off than Sunnis are. So, very limited prospects of that. The third thing you'll see, which is the positive other angle of this, is Sunni consolidation in the Gulf, which is already happening. Israel, Saudi Arabia, Emirates form almost a triple alliance against Iran. And the more Iran comes at us, if it comes at us, they won't. Because the last thing they'll want is for us to join this kind of Iran-Saudi Emirati alliance. Because even though they know India won't do much, even adding a little bit in terms of military help to these three countries are very open to using military options. Huh? They're very open to using punitive economic actions as well. So they will do stuff, and there are checks and balances in place. Next. Unirider, could either of you intimate the Urban Affairs Ministry about the need for a revolution in pedestrian infra? Already done, they don't give a shit. All Indian resi commercial streets need wider user-friendly. Yes, thank you. Tell me, you really think they don't know about this? They just don't care about this. There has not been a single urban conference that we've been to where urban development officials have been, and Hardeep Puri tried to drive some sense into the heads. It doesn't work because it's mostly left up to, remember, the Urban Affairs Ministry has very little part. Mostly city development is a local issue. Okay, to reduce the, you have public space, you have private space, and you have a unique category which is privately occupied public space, which is to say it is open area like the compound wall and things, which is not there, but it adds so much to commute time, probably more than the building itself. There are so many solutions we've tried to look at. It's easy, it's not even expensive to go in for pedestrian infrastructure, but no, not happening. They don't care, they don't listen, despite our best efforts. Next. Gargi, I worry about Bangladesh. Sheikh Hasina 74 after her who? Islamic radicals? Yes, Islamic radicals. The problem is that we brought this upon ourselves. We supported her. We didn't advise her to keep the Bangladesh National Party as a semi-viable alternative throughout. So now that they've been wiped out, you have a much more virulent form of Islamic radicalism. And look, this entire Awami League establishment is pro-India. There's nobody in it who's particularly anti-India or anything like that. But after Sheikh Hasina, yes, we will see Islamic radicalization.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and also to click on the bell button for notifications. Thank you very much. Namaskar.